Good morning, everybody. Time for another Saturday morning sneak down. Saturday morning, kids are up, but they're in their rooms and they're entertaining themselves. Wife's still in the rack, so I've got a little bit of time down here. I've been really busy with my regular job and other things lately, so Little League baseball, things like that. So I haven't had a lot of time to work down here, and even when I've been working down here, some of the things I've been doing, I just haven't been videoing because, well, quite frankly, they're tedious and boring. Like, for instance, a couple nights ago, I spent, well, I'd say at least an hour, if not longer, down here. The tedious job of cleaning up the lead screw on the Vernon here in the parts washer. Basically laying it across the parts washer, cleaning up an area, moving it over, cleaning up an area, moving it over, and doing that. And it took a lot of work to get this to the point where it is now, which is, it's actually shiny metal color. So I'm going to want to get this installed and oiled up quickly, because we are in June here. Actually, technically June 1st is this Monday. But the point is that this is the time of year where the basement here can start to get humid and give us problems. So anyways, this really cleaned up nice, but it was really tough. I ended up having to use I actually ended up trying several different brushes and scrubbing techniques, and the stuff, of course, on the surface of the threads, on the outer diameter of the lead screw, that was easy because you could really get to that. But down in the grooves, what would happen is I'd clean the outer diameter, and that would all shine up, and I could clearly see, you know, it would be shiny black, so I could see down in those grooves that that stuff wasn't coming out. And I'd take a little screwdriver and take a little scrape, and I'd come up with a whole, you know, screwdriver tip full of garbage. So I'd be like, well, obviously this stuff's still down in there. So I've finally tried several different brushes, and then the one I ended up just happening upon in my collection of junk here that worked out beautifully is, actually it's in the parts washer now. I've still got, last night we were playing with the air coat welder, just running beads, trying to get back to the idea of the technique of arc welding. And so I got this junk still on top of here, so can't show you the brush, but basically what it ended up being is it was an old brush with a plastic handle. It's got almost like brass bristles that are short, and it's got a scraper on one edge, which I didn't use, but it's actually a brush that you buy at like the cheapo stores there for cleaning your gas grill, for scrubbing the grates or the garbage off the grill. And that worked nicely because the soft bristles were able to conform and kind of get into that groove there. But even with that, it still took a lot of scrubbing, and you can imagine, you know, scrubbing, turning, then you get one section that wide and you have to move over, so it took forever to do. And then I hit the change gears. I did all those, and that similar problem with those, just took a lot of scrubbing. But now they're clean as a whistle. I didn't do as good a job. By the end, I started with the small ones and worked my way up to the large ones. By the time I got to the end of the pile here with the large ones, I could see I was no longer doing as good a job because, quite frankly, I was getting tired. As it is, this is a Saturday morning sneak down, and it's already like 7:40. And I just got down here. I mean, I probably woke up at 7:30. I must have been extra tired this week. But so it is. Alright, so I guess at this point, I think I'll play around with maybe starting to put the lead screw and some of the gears back into the Vernon. Alright, so I'm going to want to clean out these bores right here that the lead screw and that other shaft down below run through. And actually, the other shaft down below is just a rocker shaft. It doesn't actually rotate. Well, actually, maybe it's got an oiler over here, so. Well, anyways, looking at this bore right here, that's obviously really dirty, but then I just noticed that, well, now that I've got that out, it's the perfect time to double check. I think I cleaned this hole right here when I had this in the parts washer, but I'll just run a pipe cleaner through. Yeah, nothing's fallen out, so that's already clean. When I had this whole casting, I cleaned that. Now that's interesting. Get an oiler on this. Get this oil hole right here on this side, and the tube running down the oil this side. What oil is this? Oh, okay, this one's outboard. I see. There's a oiler right here, and actually, this is one of those ball spring JIT oilers, and or GIT, and it's missing the ball and the spring. I think I actually found the spring in there, and it was. Yeah, when I was taking this apart, that's right, I remember now. When I was taking this apart, this damn thing had the spring all stuck in there. Yeah, I hate to say this, but there is a groove, a good-sized groove behind there. I've got a bad feeling that that's supposed to have a felt in it. Alright, a little more investigating, and here's what I've surmised. First thing, I don't know why I thought I had taken this whole casting off and cleaned it, because this is all dirty and this is part of the casting. I'm actually thinking back to the Hendy. I had taken this quick change gearbox housing off the Hendy and cleaned it. I never took this one off completely. Secondly, the shaft on the bottom here certainly does rotate, because I totally forgot about how this works, but outboard of that shaft on this side, there's a gear that's driven. That shaft is always under power, and then that is always turning. That is always turning one of the two gears on this assembly, which moves back and forth with the lever to change gears, change speeds, okay, or feed rates. And then the other one of those two gears that's not driven by that lower lever is the one that engages one of the gears in this cone or stack of gears on the top that's on the lead screw. So that shaft on the bottom certainly does turn all the time whenever this drive is engaged. So what I can't figure out is why, for some reason, this top one behind this GIT oiler is a groove, and it's wide enough to suggest that it should have a piece of felt in it. There's a common practice on, it's interesting enough, I got to look at these again, because I was just looking on the early south bed cone head lathes. They actually had felts that were in these caps, and the purpose of the felt, for those of you who don't already know, is so that when you put oil in here, the oil runs down, saturates the felt, and the felt is in direct contact with the surface of the spindle, and it's constantly transferring that film of oil around to where it's supposed to be. If you don't have the felt there, you get the oil in, the oil will go along the groove and it will work into where it needs to work, but it will also quickly want to leak out. So you end up oiling it, you end up with nothing but oil. So if there's no facility or ability for this to do that, what ends up happening is you end up with a lot of oil leaking out all over the machine, and you're also not keeping oil in there all the time. Now, that makes me wonder about how well this was oiled over its. The other way that they handle the oiling on some of these old cone head lathes is they'll have a felt plug in the base of this oiler assembly, and the felt plug is basically there to slow down that migration of the oil into the system. So we'll investigate that in a moment. But back to what I was talking about here. So so I stuck my finger in there and felt around, and I just had to wash my hands because they were black. It certainly feels like it's all grease. And you know, there's another possibility there. Maybe the reason why they were using grease on this thing is because, well, first I'm making the assumption that this is for oil. Maybe they were using grease on this thing because they found that when they put oil in here, it just flowed out all over the place. Because maybe somebody else had this apart at some point. Because when I took this apart, there was no felt in there. All that was in there was the remnants of the spring. Okay, which, by the way, I found another little tiny piece of spring inside there, so I'm glad I got that out. I'm going to clean that bore out. And anyways, what troubles me is, oh yeah, okay, so the groove is on this one right here that the lead screw runs through. Okay, then you get this identical bore down below here. Its kit oiler isn't broken. But here's the interesting thing. This one doesn't have a groove. It's just got a hole. So at the factory, when you're building this lathe, and both of these shafts are rotating, and you're talking you're engineering this thing, and you're thinking, how are we going to get this thing to stay oiled well? And you go through the trouble of putting in an oil groove with for a felt in this one. Why don't you do this one? Or did neither one of them have a groove originally? And was this lathe modified by the original owner? Because I hearken back to a lot of the writings I find about oil grooves and things like that on, if you go and Google books, there are several different old machinery periodicals that were used in the industry back in the early 1900s. And a lot of those periodicals have been reprinted in book form and available for free on Google Books, and there's just a lot of information out there that you can cull through. Believe me, taken from somebody who knows, you can spend hours looking at articles, very arcane articles on subjects, and I found more than one article. There are sections of those magazines where basically you had guys in the trade, guys working in factories and things like that at the time, that were actually developing their own fixes and modifications for these machines, and then they would write the article and send it in, and it would be printed and published. And I guess that was kind of like a little badge of honor if you got your little article published on how to, you know, how to make a modification here or a modification there. And then of course that always begs the question, you know, how good of an idea was it, just because they published it in the magazine back then? Because I've found several different you know, versions. I've seen several different things where I'm like, well, they don't really do that anymore, do they? All right, well, I'm getting off the subject here. Let me clean that bore up. This one has nowhere near the kind of disgusting stickiness to it that I found in the other one. So I'm wondering whether or not this one was spared the grease treatment with the grease gun, because it still has the original ball get oiler on it. Maybe this one, the guy either broke the ball out on purpose or it broke, and then he said, oh, there's a hole there, I can put my nozzle of my grease gun right over that, pump grease right on in there. But even then though, you know, there wasn't all grease squeezed out on the edge there. So maybe that's just oil, it's just really gotten dirty. And you know, maybe maybe he was using whey oil or something that was really tacky and sticky. Absolutely no groove in there. There's no radial oil groove even, or anything. A little hard to feel the end of that hole there. Yeah. Now that I clean this, the more I clean it, the more I think, as far as that being grease, I think I was just hallucinating. That's too thick. Because of the whey sticking out over this, it's hard as heck to get a gander at that groove. Yeah, that's a felt groove if I ever seen them. It's shallow and wide, almost like it's almost like a keyway. And what that's for is that's for a felt wick. Now, whether or not it's factory original or it was added later, I don't know. I'd like to assume it's factory original, but the reason why I question is because, again, if it's factory original, why on earth put one in here and not bother doing this one? Especially since this one's turning whenever this one's turning. Well, technically, I guess you could drop the lever down here to the slot and it's disengaged. But, you know, you don't usually do that, so I don't know. Well, it's 8:40. I've been down here for an hour. Not a lot of battery life left on the camera either, so I'm going to be wrapping it up soon. But before I go, I finished cleaning this up, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the width of this little slot right here and make some notes on what I need to buy for felt. I haven't ordered the felts, the cord, what I believe is cord-shaped felt for that comb pulley. I haven't ordered that yet from McMaster Car, so I can add some felt wick to that order for here. And then also there's one on the other side there that I completely disregarded. Fortunately, I can get this measurement on the width of this stuff, this groove right here. Alright, I just have to set this. Alright, that should be about right. Carefully pull it out. 0.264. I don't have that stuff memorized, so chart. 0.264 is only 14 thousandths over quarter inch. I don't need the chart. Duh.